right, folks, as y'all can tell, I'm at one of my other locations, and it's time for World Politics. So we'll be talking about what's happening on the political front, and I've got Sasha Starr with me, and other folks may be joining us as well. But definitely a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen with the Nikki Haley campaign should she not win the election there in South Carolina, and all along those lines. And one of the articles that I saw, and I know that it's also not one of Sasha's favorite people, but definitely Justice Alito is mad that George W. Bush was too woke. So definitely that is something that is going on in a dissenting opinion. Alito took a pot shot at Bush's signature racial justice program. So that is something that is going on. So the Supreme Court announced on Tuesday that it will not hear the Coalition for TJ versus Fairfax County School Board, a lawsuit attacking a school admissions program that was considered a cutting edge conservative idea a quarter century ago, and whose most prominent champion was Republican former President George W. Bush. So two justices dissented, with Justice Samuel Alito writing an angry opinion attacking a school admissions policy that closely mirrors Bush's signature racial justice program. In the late 1980s, when Bush was governor of Texas, he signed legislation creating that state's top 10% law for university admission. As the name implies, Bush's law guaranteed that Texas high school students who graduated in the top 10% of their class would be admitted to state-run universities. The program is still in effect, although the state's flagship school, the University of Texas at Austin, only accepts the top 6% or so of students due to increased applications. Bush proudly touted this program as a way to racially diversify Texas universities and as an alternative to race-conscious admission programs. The Republicans have long disdained programs that are recently declared illegal by the Supreme Court's GOP-appointed majority. As Bush said in 2000 while campaigning for the presidency, top 10% style programs affect the pool of applicants of minority students available for higher ed in positive ways. So like I said, there are some people that are not too happy about those kind of programs, and there are some people that are not the biggest fans of these kind of affirmative action programs. But I've got Kim Calhoun with me, and I've also got Sasha Starr as well. But I just thought we'd start off with that and everything. And of course, there are other political things that folks might be interested in as well. But apparently, Justice Alito is thinking that George W. Bush, and I've heard in the past, Sasha, that you were not the biggest fan of George Sr. and everything, but apparently Justice Alito felt that he was being too woke back in his day and everything. So I was wondering if folks' thoughts about that, and then we'll get to some other political issues, including whether Nikki can actually win South Carolina. But any thoughts around this notion of all people, George W. Bush being accused of being too woke?
Well, can I answer this?
Yes, please.
Does the word count if it didn't exist back then? Because I don't think woke existed the way we use it today. Actually, it took me a while to understand what it meant. When we said, "Are you woke? Are you woke up yet? Or have you opened your eyes a little bit?" But there's a whole new definition to the word woke, and I just don't think we should call somebody that from back then when that word didn't exist. That's my thought.
Well, I'd love to hear Rick's thoughts about this. We've also got Rick, but yeah, woke is a term.
One of the problems. Hello. One of the problems with woke is that it doesn't have a definition. It's just an accusation.
There you go.
It's like, when I was a kid, everybody bullied each other by calling each other fags. And fag has a meaning like a homosexual, but it also has a meaning, a nebulous meaning that just like, oh, you're a wimp or you're just a geek. And it's like, it's very nebulous. It's just like, you annoy me because you're doing something that I wouldn't do. And you need to be called out for it. And I feel like woke is the same thing, that it's not well defined, but you annoy me.
Sure.
Yep, and apparently people are being annoyed. Apparently there is a popular rock group, and apparently there are some people that got annoyed because they decided to take a stand on an issue. But many people are familiar with the group U2, and U2 frontman Bono took some time out from the band's set list at his concert in Las Vegas to share some impactful words with the audience at the venue before performing the U2 song Peace on Earth. The Dublin native shared his thoughts on how religion can so enrage us. So the Irish performer has always been quite open about his views on war and religion throughout his career. And at Sunday night show at the groundbreaking venue and everything, Bono took some time out to address the ongoing situation in Palestine, referring to how Ireland achieved peace and ended the troubles. So during his passionate speech at the Las Vegas Sphere, where U2 is currently performing their second run of shows, Bono told the cheering crowd to shut up while he was sharing his thoughts. He said, to see what the children of Abraham have been doing to each other all over the world for millennia, as well as this very day, is bewildering to see the suffering of Palestinian children after we saw the suffering of Israeli children. He added, when love looks laughable, I am sure that it is the devil laughing. I understand how ridiculous love the enemy sounds right now. We can't live with love thy neighbor, even in our band, in our country, but it is a divine command and not advice. So apparently he was putting his word out there. And he said, in Ireland, we never quite got there. We have a fragile but beautiful peace we are grateful for. We did it in Ireland. We're proud we did it in Ireland. And like I said, Bono is definitely one of those musicians that likes to speak his truth and everything, because he even brought up, and you'll love this, Sasha, he brought up Navalny and everything. He said, apparently Putin would never, ever say his name, though I thought tonight the free people from here, people who believe in freedom, we must say his name, speaking of the dissident that just recently died. Now, not just remember it, but to say it, he added, Bono gave the passionate speech during an expanded intro to the song Don't Dream, It's Over, which they have been performing recently at their residency there at the Las Vegas Sphere. But any thoughts around one, musicians using these platforms to state their truth? And definitely it seems like he was wondering if we can have peace on earth. And I know that that's something that many people talk about, particularly in the season we just left, the Christmas season. But I've also heard people say that that's next to impossible, that we as humans are very much at each other's throats and that there will probably always be conflict. But what's your thoughts, Sasha? Can we actually have peace on earth? And Rick, do you have any thoughts too? But I'll start with Sasha.
No, it's impossible to have peace on the earth for biological reasons. The human beings are overly aggressive species. They are very competitive. They are about fight for every piece of whether it's a land or even furniture or just a woman, or it just doesn't matter. They will always compete, they will always fight, therefore the peace is impossible, just as simple as that.
So people don't like when celebrities talk about issues, but it's mostly when celebrities say things they don't agree with. And I would argue that celebrities can often be better informed than most people because they've got a team of assistants and they've got time on their hands. They can inform themselves. Clooney's pretty well informed. I trust Bono to have his own knowledge about, the situation in Ireland, since that's where he's from. I think it's the situation in Gaza. I just read an article this morning, 69,000 Gazas wounded, 29,000 killed, maybe 10,000 Hamas among the killed out of 30,000 Hamas. So probably most of Hamas is still out there.
Yep. Definitely. I hear what you're saying. Anything, by the way, we've been joined by Debbie Peterson. I'm glad that she's able to make a trip. We've been missing her and her conversation and insight. One thing we were talking about, Debbie, was I was mentioning that they're in Vegas Sunday. Bono, who's with U2, and everything started to bring up the wrong Bono because I think of Sonny and Cher, but it was actually the U2 Bono was making some statements about peace on earth and wanting peace on earth and all along those lines. And apparently he had a very impassioned plea at their latest concert. I was just wondering your thoughts about some of the conflicts, and is Sasha right that we as humans will never have peace on earth and will always be dealing with gun rights and some of these other issues, or is this something that can be attained in our society? And definitely there are a couple of other things, because I was going to get to Nikki Haley and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. But before we get to that, your thoughts on whether we can have peace on earth in this particular day.
Well, we have had peace on Earth in the past, maybe not Earth-wide, but there are communities that have peace on Earth. And I think what we forget is that we're all human beings. And we all really are the same in so many ways. And it is sad when we're killing each other. So I think we can have peace on Earth. But there needs to be the public will for that. There needs to be the political will for that.
And I agree with that as well. I think that sometimes we do negotiate some kind of peace between countries, whether it's, for monetary reasons or not. But in the overall right now, I just think it's just overwhelming the amount of small wars or big battles that are going on in different portions of the world, and it's escalating, and it keeps escalating, and our mass shootings keep escalating. Yes, Rick.
So, I mean, the conflicts throughout the world, a lot of them are tied together, like Russia and to some extent Iran love stirring things up every place because it weakens Western democracies. The BRICS countries, who are loosely allied. But Debbie said we're all human, but we're moving into an era over the next 20, 50 years where we're not going to all be human, and it'll open up a whole new area of conflict when AIs and people augmented with AIs start competing with, it's not going to be Skynet, but it won't not be Skynet either.
It's going to be close. It already is.
Like AI requires like vast resources, and people using AI and the AIs themselves, when they start having their own objectives, which they will, within some of our lifetimes, that's going to open up just all sorts of new conflicts. Plus, climate change could conceivably displace 400 million people, 600 million people. It's already, contributing to conflicts throughout the world. So
Rick, so along those same lines, I'm glad you brought it up, and I did have that other question I was going to bring up as well. But one of our other folks that has been on the show a number of times, that being Toby, had actually showed this to me, and all along this line. And this is actually AI created. And as you can tell, this woman looks very real. Looks like she's walking through a city that could be Tokyo or a number of other things, but this is actually strictly AI created. The body features and everything else. So if I had not told you that was AI, would you know that was AI? Because it looks almost very realistic to me. And there was a number of other ones that I saw as well. But this is actually on openai.com/Sora and everything. But this is just one image. There was also one of a coastal scene, and even an octopus fighting a crab that looked very realistic. But if I had not just told you that this was AI, would you have known that this was not
if you know what to look for, you can spot things that give it away. I mean, at first glance, if you're not paying attention, yeah, it looks totally real. But like they did a close-up on her face, and if you looked at her glasses, I would bet you that the logo doesn't match any real logo. It'd be like, nope, somebody made that up. But yeah, AI looks great. I mean, this is no less interesting to watch than, real footage.
Well, AI has evolved to the point that it can take over, and we've seen this, but take over human characteristics. And we've seen this when they were able to take a video of Obama, and then they piped whatever words they wanted to come out of his mouth moved to it, and it was his voice. So AI, I mean, that was years ago. And so AI is evolving into becoming so realistic, you're not going to know the difference. I do believe we're entering the Skynet phase of our lives. If there was ever anyone who wrote a book or a story about our future, that was it.
Yep, no doubt. And just give another image just really quickly. I did have a question for Debbie that was alluding back to the political discussion, but this is a AI image as well, and this is actually AI created from that same website and everything, but you can say these animals look like they're running through the tundra, and they look very realistic to me. I wouldn't be trying to face these animals if I saw them and all in that space, but it does look very realistic and all in that way. So that's just two examples of the very realistic way that AI is out there. Debbie, one of the things I'm hearing, and
Wait, Sasha should talk. Sasha's a huge AI investor. He buys a ton of NVIDIA.
Today is also, I think, the 200th day for when they defined dinosaurs a scientific word. I think 200 years ago today. I was hearing something about that today. So looking at that kind of makes me think of dinosaurs. But, you know, AI can emulate or simulate many things that we do, but it still lacks one thing that we do have, and that's empathy. Now they can create it to have tears now, and it is moved on empathy, on design, but it lacks the ability to spontaneously have empathy. And I don't think it ever will. I just
and
don't
speaking
think
of,
we'll ever be able to create AI to do that.
yeah, and
I
speaking of
think
empathy and everything along those same lines, because this was the question I had for definitely Debbie, but I had heard recently, maybe a week or two ago, and everything, this notion of the race with Nikki Haley, and I think Nikki Haley in the last week or two has said that she is confident that there will be a woman leader in 2024. I think she actually meant 2025, but the election in 2024, and she was saying it will probably either be her or Kamala Harris, but it's one that is in the leadership space. It's one that has definitely seen other women that have done great things, and there have been some great women leaders even here in the Carolinas and everything. I was just wondering your take on the possibility of there being a woman president, and possibly it being one of those two instead of the folks that are in the late 70s and early 80s phase, which is what we currently have people thinking that it will be Biden against Trump. But Nikki Haley came out, I think it was about a week and a half ago, and said that she is confident that it will either be herself or another person that is of partial Indian descent, that being definitely Kamala Harris as well. But what is your take as one that has worked with a number of women leaders there in California?
Well, I do hope that that is the case. And what I will say is history and local studies, or I should say recent studies, all indicate that if either of those women become president or are working together in one way or another, they'll work together, they'll cooperate, they'll be compatible, they'll figure things out together far more successfully than we have been finding of late. And so I wanted to go back to the artificial intelligence argument as well, or discussion. And that is that when I look at those things, to me, they look like movie sets. They're clearly movie sets. And I think maybe the defining way to figure out what you're looking at, is it real or not, is, does it look like you're watching a movie? If it looks like it's special effects or it's a movie, it's probably special effects or a movie. It's AI. It's not the real deal. So this isn't new. We've had this. We've had better and better and better special effects in the films. So I think that's something to look out for. How are people moving? Are they all moving exactly the same way? That's not normal. And so, but going back, yes, my immediate reaction is that right now we're in an incredible era. The countries that rank themselves as the 5 happiest countries in the world are run by millennial women, which is simply phenomenal, and it doesn't get out there on the news. And so I think we would be better off if women were equally represented in office. So yeah, you hit it, Mark. That's where I'm coming from.
If you look at the Vegas odds, Kamala Harris is 16-1, Nikki Haley is 20-1, and Trump is a little less than 50% likely to get elected, and Biden's a little less than 30%. So, and we've got 260 days until the election, and what would take Biden out would be some kind of health scare.
But along those same lines, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts, including Nick, because I know he's brought it up on some of our past shows and everything. But there is another issue that is out there that a lot of people are concerned about, and that is the issue around immigration. So apparently there is a new poll out there now where President Biden is continuing to be plagued with very dismal approval ratings concerning his handling of immigration. as Americans across the country are watching the border crisis. And I know that you're over there in California, Debbie, so you might have some thoughts around this as well. But according to a new Monmouth University poll released just earlier today, just 26% of Americans say they approve of Biden's handling of immigration, while a whopping 76% disapprove. And when broken down by party affiliation, slightly over half of Democrats said they approved of Biden's handling of immigration, but just 21% of independents and Republicans. So this could be an issue that could be problematic for President Biden and everything, particularly with the rising amount of folks that are part of the Hispanic bloc and everything. But I was just wondering everybody's thoughts, but definitely want to hear from Debbie and from Nick this notion of this being an issue, just like the abortion issue could be an issue in terms of the women's vote and everything. But I just wanted your take on this, because a lot of folks I know, including some people that are of Latin American descent, are not exactly happy with the way that immigration is being handled.
I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and there's been a lot of room for improvement for a long time. And when it becomes a political issue the way it has, it's really hard to tell what's true and what's not true, what's rhetoric and what's really happening, and what's changed, what's better, what's worse. However, and of course, seeing it all on the media is probably a good thing, because we all come to understand it better. I had a very interesting experience. I was coming home from Mexico, and I made a silly mistake. I was walking across the border in Tijuana, which is it's wonderful. There's like a skyway that you just walk from the airport in Tijuana into the United States, and you have to pay to do it, and use your passport. It's all legitimate. But I took a wrong turn. I was in a hurry, and instead of going out the United States door, I went out the Tijuana door. And so I was leaving Mexico and ended up back in Mexico. So I had to take a taxi to the border, but I couldn't go to the near border, San Isidro, because it's closed. And so in California, one of the borders is actually simply closed. As an American, I couldn't cross it. No one could cross it. I had to travel another 20 minutes to get a taxi that could take me across the border a little bit further away. So it's interesting, because clearly something's been done there that's making a difference. And I certainly didn't see hordes of people there. So I don't know. That's all I can say. I don't really know what's going on or not going on. But in California, we are not having the same issues and the same problems, maybe because I don't think we have the Rio Grande in California. I'm not sure. Anyway, so it doesn't seem to be as big of an issue here as in Texas.
Texas overreacts a lot of things. But I got a question for you. You said it's closed. Is it permanently closed? You're saying Americans can't come?
Nobody could cross the border. The border crossing was closed, period.
So if Americans wanted to go to Mexico, where did they go?
It's very interesting, because you see, I was getting this from Mexicans. I wasn't getting it from Americans. So I don't know. I should have inquired more. It would have been really interesting. Maybe someone out there can figure it out, but it was definitely, there was no way to get into the United States from that border, according to the Mexicans. And there were several Americans wanting to cross. We all had to travel another 20 minutes or so to get to a border crossing.
So you mentioned the Monmouth poll. Polls right now are a mess. I mean, sure, most people don't like what's happening with the border, but the numbers that come out of polls are increasingly untrustworthy. YouTube, The Economist, for instance, it's so hard to get people to say yes to polls that YouTube, The Economist polls use a pool of 10,000 people that they've recruited, and those people get paid for taking polls. And once every, 2 weeks or a month, they pick 1,500 people out of that pool and ask them, about what they think. And if that 10,000 people is contaminated with lunatics, which I would say it is, it skews the polls.
Well, and that's a problem with the polls, because a lot of times historically they've been calling landlines, and the people who still have landlines are a completely different demographic. Often they're elderly or homebound, homeowners. It's a really different demographic than, say, the young people who all have only cell phones and probably aren't answering polls. They're out working. So yeah, I think there's a lot of room for
You tell me, we were having an interesting conversation about that here at my cultural arts center that I work at, because there are a number of people that a lot of what we do is online. So we provide information online, and there were some people that were wanting the old fashioned way. So they wanted trifles and other things in that space. But yeah, there are some of the younger people that are like, you have to come into the new technology. And there were some of us that were like, no, but you also have to have stuff for the folks that aren't necessarily part of that new technology so that they can be informed as well. So I think that whether it is a national organization or a local organization, you definitely need to have all of the aspects covered. Both that is very technologically oriented, as well as that for folks that may not be as much into social media and some of the social media outlets and even the smartphone, which I do have one of those and everything. But yeah, there are folks that are still not in that space. One of the things, Kim, that I know we have is a show around cyber communications and all along those lines. So another thing that is going on, and particularly in the world of politics, is the notion of cybersecurity. And apparently, there's a global law enforcement effort crackdown on a Lockbit ransomware group, and I had mentioned that on the earlier show on World Edition. But I just wonder, how concerned should people be about these ransomware attacks and all in that space? That's why I was directing that to you, Kim, because I know that you've been involved in that field and everything. But that seems like that's something that folks may need to pay attention to, even from a political standpoint as well. So maybe that's an issue that our politicians need to address, and that folks who will be concerned about even during this election. And that's all that Sasha's got his hands up as well. But definitely, you want to defer to Sasha, and then you'll answer Kim.
Yeah, let's see what Sasha has to say.
Okay, just lots of facts. First of all, about artificial intelligence. Right now, it's all useless idiom where people get squeezed for money. They're buying useless stocks and they're believing in the something wonderful will happen. Right now, it's absolutely meaningless item. There's only real companies who are making money on that. It's the companies like NVIDIA, which provide infrastructure without which no one can create anything in artificial intelligence. And those who can create something, what you just saw, I totally agree. It's nothing but entertainment, some kind of moving pictures, and there is no substance in it at all, period. Now, second issue is you were talking about immigration. Immigration became nothing but political ploy. They have these cowards from Republican Party playing to this fraud by the name Donald Trump, and they're trying to push the immigration that look, people are unhappy. So who is unhappy? What kind of Americans are unhappy about immigrations, whether it's 5,000 or 50,000 or even 500,000? Each one who comes to United States, he needs to live somewhere. So he has to rent or buy something. He has to eat. He has to send their children to school. So they're provided a great economic resource for the United States. And immigration is the only reason why United States hasn't had recession for the last few years. Because there were a lot of problems with COVID, with slowed down, with all kinds of things, and there's no recession yet. And the economy is doing fantastically well, and will do even better when interest rates will start going down. I don't know, probably May, June, maybe July. So immigration is absolutely inverted, and also it's inhumane. It's inhumane when you have now, I think it was Texas, that they're now saying that embryo is a human life. What a bunch of idiots. So people who are trying to cross the border, and they're real people, they're not embryos. They're real people. So how corrupt, how insane you must say that these people you have to shoot at them and not allow them to cross the border, and the embryos are real people, and you have to say that. My God, this is absolutely insane. Only in America.
Well, Sasha, I think that you bring the Canadian outlook, which is a much more positive, constructive outlook, in my opinion, and that's why Canadians rate themselves as being in the top 10 happiest countries in the world. And it's something I've been asked to study or to write about by Psychology Today, and that's why I keep talking about these figures and studies. But in the countries where people are happiest, they integrate their immigrants. They and everybody is better off for it. Everybody economically benefits, not just the immigrants, but the non-immigrants. And so, and it's that same thing. We forget that we're all human, and that the boundaries that we create, they're real boundaries in terms of, physical boundaries. But the reality is, we've drawn lines in the sand, and humans have always traveled all over the world. It's just how it is, and so maybe better to accept how it is and embrace those who do, and we are all better off.
Hey, Debbie, just really quickly, as you were saying that, I just had another question for you and this actually comes down to Trump, but it also comes down to Jesse Ventura and a number of others as well. If we get to the point in politics where you just need to be a famous star and all in order to get elected, because it looks like there is a great and amazing baseball player, and while baseball is not one of the sports that I follow routinely, I do know who Steve Garvey is, and apparently he was an amazing baseball player, and it looks like he's taking the lead there in California. So it looks like he might be riding his baseball fame into the California Senate and everything. So I just wonder, is this where we're going? Is that we're going to see less lawyers? I hate to tell you that, Nick, but more of the celebrities that will be running the various legislatures, whether that is local or whether that is national. Because that's why I mentioned both Jesse and Trump, because a lot of times what they were known for is their celebrity. And I don't even know what Steve Garvey's positions are. And maybe you know better than I do. But it does look like with that baseball name, as a former Dodger, that he is riding it into some possible victory, because it looks like he is climbing in the latest polls and everything.
No, Steve Garvey's Republican. California's 2/3 Democratic. We have we have a two-person runoff system now, which leads to some weird effects. That you vote for your person, and then they take the top two and have them run again in the general. And so the Democrats, Adam Schiff, is running ads that are kind of against Steve Garvey, hoping to actually promote Steve Garvey, because Adam Schiff wants to be in the runoff against Steve Garvey, a weaker candidate than Katie Porter. So there are these ads against Steve Garvey that are actually trying to trick people into giving him enough votes that he beats Katie Porter. And it's a little crazy.
It's a lot crazy, and it's California, and this is nothing new. Ronald Reagan was our president, and so a name recognition means a lot. But again, I don't think a Republican is going to make it. And Adam Schiff has quite a resume and his own celebrity behind him with his work on the insurrection.
But the good thing about being a celebrity in politics is that you don't have a record to be attacked on. What wrecked Hillary was she'd been in politics for 30, 35 years, and there were all these places where the Republicans could make up issues. Obama got in. He hadn't even been a senator for a full term. He didn't have much of a record. There was less to attack him on. Trump had zero political stuff. And so, you look at celebrities may be where we get, they can be unifying.
Speaking of celebrities, and this is one, maybe Nick's got some thoughts on this, but I know we did one, I guess it was last year, but on President's Day, which was yesterday and everything, the historians did a survey. And apparently in the survey, it wasn't close in terms of popularity. So the poll ranked Biden as the 14th best president, with Trump coming in dead last. So that's how they ranked him and everything. So Trump was ranked as the worst U.S. president in history, with Biden being labeled the 14th greatest. So I know that Rick has said several times that he's not a big fan of polls, but apparently the poll of the historians is giving the edge towards Mr. Biden, President Biden versus former President Trump and everything. So I don't know whether folks have any thoughts about this notion.
There have been, since Trump starting in 2018, there have been 5 polls of presidential historians. Trump was ranked in 2 of them. Trump came in dead last. The other ones, he came in second to last, third worst, and fourth worst. Most academics, these are people who study the presidency, lean left. So it was a bunch of liberals, some moderates, some conservatives. The conservatives this time around only ranked Trump 4th worst in history. Or fifth.
I'd like to get back to the subject of immigration for the panel. Okay.
Yes.
The immigration policy of the United States. Can anybody here on the panel articulate the immigration policy of the United States of America in 2 minutes or less?
I don't know about articulating it, but I can tell you that it seems to have different rules for different people, because it does seem like there have been some conversations around the kind of visas that folks from the Indian community get versus other communities. And of course, there was the whole notion of how the Haitians were treated versus the Cubans. So I would say that in one sense, there is not a uniformity, but that there are biases that exist within our immigration policy. That is one thing.
You can look at it. You can look at immigration like a series of dials where we turn it up, we turn it down, depending on national freakouts. It used to be, if you got to Ellis Island 120 years ago, you were in unless you had tuberculosis or something else. And then, people started freaking out and talking eugenics, and IQ tests came along, which unfairly showed certain races and nationalities to be less desirable. And then you had this Immigration Act passed in 1930, which imposed all sorts of immigration quotas, which led to Jews being sent back to Hitler to be slaughtered. So right now we're in a period of freaking out about immigration, but in general, we want to let in a certain amount of what we consider good immigrants, and we want to hold off everybody else.
Okay. So what you're saying today, the immigration policy of the United States is a quota policy basically based on 1930 statistics. Would that be correct?
I don't think we're still going off the 1930 statistics, but yeah, there are still quotas that reflect our biases and fears.
Okay. So our immigration system is based on bias and fear. Would that be correct, Counselor?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay. I would accept that to be the immigration policy of the United States is based on fear and quotas. I mean, which is a very extremely poor way to judge your immigration system. So the thing is, really, the United States has a horrible immigration policy. It all starts at the top. No leadership, no policy, except based on fear and quota. Yes, Councilor.
I think that we're allowing politics to dictate the policies at this time. So it truly depends on whether you're Republican or if you are Democrat, and how you swing in order to control the border. I don't think anyone is really controlling what needs to be controlled. And I think we misuse the words migrants for people who really are just seeking safe haven. And I think people have misrepresented what's going on at the border. And I am going to bring a chief of Border Patrol here to speak on our show very soon. He's retired, but I think that there's just a lot misrepresented. I mean, I'm not even going to say whether he's going to represent everything that's really happening, but I think that it's just over exaggerated. I think that they over exaggerate what's happening. The women that are being raped and abused are the Hispanic women over in Mexico, but they make it sound like it's American women being raped and abused and beaten and robbed. And it's not. It's the women who are stuck at the border trying to get over, and they're seeking safe haven. And there's a different word for that. right? There's a different word for a human seeking safe haven than there is a migrant, if you really read the definitions. And so we have misinterpreted the whole border situation. We've misrepresented what's really happening, and we've truly lost. We've truly lost the human factor in all
You
of
know,
this.
that you caused me to think on that. I know that our ancestors were people who were survivors. They made it on these crazy journeys, and actually that improved our gene pool. We're a country of innovators, survivors, entrepreneurs, and those are the people who that you're talking about who are trying to come in. They're the people who had the courage of their convictions, the ability, the physical ability, the mental, the emotional, psychological ability to actually make huge journeys to do something better. That's who we are as Americans. That is amazing. I'd never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
Just
I
along
mean,
those lines,
the
we do
women
have
that are
a
there now, they're just seeking safe haven. So when you see a lot of people that are trying to swim across the river or across, and many are drowning right now, and you've got the Texas Border Patrol just standing there letting them drown as opposed to making rescue missions. It's horrific in my mind to think that they think they're better than any other human to shut a border off like that. It's really disappointing to me that we can't figure this out. We're smarter than this.
just really
Maybe we
quick.
should
I did
let
see your hand,
AI
Ricky.
start controlling us.
I did
I
see
would
your hand.
vote AI and president right now over the two that we have. I would vote for an AI.
I hear you and everything.
So I
did see
agree
your-
with Sasha that right now AI is stupid. AI doesn't know anything, doesn't understand. It's a prediction engine based on big data being fed into servers.
It is.
And the question is, does AI ever get smart? And some people say, yeah, in 10 years. Some people say in 50 years. Some people say never. But there's also the question that even like, you know, slightly smart AI used by people who intimately know how to work it will begin to have an advantage as AI gets more powerful. And I've got a buddy who's in the tech space. He starts, tech companies, and he's like a mini Bill Gates. He says we will have 1 trillion AIs by the end of this century. They won't all be, robot girlfriends and butlers. Most of them won't be conscious, but there'll be a ton of them. And 1 trillion is bigger than the 4 million immigrants that we're freaking out about. We should be freaking out more about technology than people coming over the border. 100 years ago, America was 14% people who weren't born here. Now, 14% people who weren't born here.
And that's a pretty good ratio, actually, as countries go. And that's something I had looked at also in the United Nations happiness studies that the polls they've done with Gallup. And 14% is a healthy percentage. It's a good percentage, in terms of what makes countries work well.
Yeah. Speaking of that and everything, and speaking of
I want
healthy
to add
percentages,
something about AI because that is a little bit of my background for many years before I got into media. And I still stay in tuned with it, but it's only as intelligent as the data we feed it, period. So if you
Garbage in,
feed it
garbage out.
be as smart. I mean, but AI is nothing more than the data and the information we put into it. If we miss a 1 or a 0 in programming it, then it's going to miss that 1 and 0 forever and ever. It's just never going to correct itself. So you have to remember that. And that's where I get a little panicky is when people want to start saying, let's let AI do everything. I joke about it, but I mean, seriously, human intelligence has to be in control over it. And I don't think it's ever going to turn into a full-fledged unless we feed it right. And we haven't. We feed it prejudice. We feed it wrong data. Think about this. We used to send men to space, right? Now when you send people to space or in the water, you don't know if the ship's going to make it. We used to be able to trust a ship. I used to go, yeah, I would go into space anytime. If you asked me to go now, and not because of my age, I would say no, because humans are building it and humans can't think anymore. They don't know how to.
Hey, just really quickly and everything, just to let you know, we've got a listener that has been making some very interesting comments, and
Hi,
it looks like he is
Dwayne.
definitely on the issues and everything. So we've got Dwayne Elizondo, Mountain Dew, Herbert Camacho, but he was saying that transferring deportation and shutting down the border caused the mass migration, and I'm thinking he's of the Hispanic descent. And he also said right stream media is targeting Hispanics and is causing hysteria among impoverished South Americans and everything. And he also added that the United States caused most of the instability that Central and South American countries are facing. So he's actually making the argument that part of the problems that are going on in Venezuela and other places are being caused by the U.S. And last but not least, he said that AI uses the internet to learn. You're absolutely wrong in correction. That's what his thoughts are and everything in that space. And he was also arguing that AI feeds itself data. So we've got a gentleman that is making some comments, including those about Latin America.
Data comes
Well,
from humans.
there's a huge industry we
The data
don't
comes
hear
from
about in countries where people get paid crappy wages, that people get, that there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people who pre-digest the data so AI can understand it. That there's some country where, you know, people, hundreds of people are scanning in pictures of shirts, circling the shirt and adding tags to it, so an AI learns what a shirt is. AI costs billions, tens of billions, some of them to develop, and that cost, much of that cost is human wages. And what
Along
he's
the
saying
same lines and everything.
what he's saying about the border panic might be true. We sell more guns when there's a Democrat in the White House than when there's a Republican, because fear sells guns.
And speaking of fear and everything, and this is actually for Nick, but if anybody else wants to jump in, because you know one of the things that people do, particularly when they are poor, is they try to find a quick way to make money, and sometimes those odds go against them. But there is a man in Washington D.C. that is suing the organizers of the Powerball lottery after he woke up to what he thought was news that he had the winning numbers, only to find out that the wrong numbers were accidentally posted on the lottery's website. So he is actually suing some very big amount of money because the prize was estimated to be $340 million. So he is suing them for $340 million because the plaintiff, John Cheeks, chose the number 7, 15, 23, 32, and 40 with a Powerball number of 2. And on January 7th, 2023, it must be something about those early January dates around that time and everything, because I think that was close to around the insurrection time and everything. But the DC's lottery winning numbers posted on his website matched the one that Cheeks had. And definitely he was thinking that he won, and then he found out that he didn't win. So now he is filing a lawsuit there in the Supreme Superior Court of Washington, D.C. So, Nick, does he stand a chance? Because apparently he's suing them because he's thinking that he got wrongfully was cheated out of money that he should have gotten because the numbers were posted. That's what the numbers said. And then they said, hey, we're sorry, those aren't the actual numbers and everything. So you're the lawyer in the group. Will he take a chance in this case?
Mark, this number is much less than Donald Trump has to pay for his judgment. So it's okay. It's not so bad.
Not so bad. But basically, he doesn't have a case. Okay, there's what they call in law mistake of fact, which is what happens, which will be the defense. He may get what they call incidental or inconsequential damages, which will be minor or have some settlement value. But if he thinks, that he's going to sue for the entire amount and win it, he's got him and his attorney have rocks for brains.
Yeah, how do you get an attorney to even take the case?
It ain't happening, Captain. It ain't happening.
Well, I have to kind of go along with the fact that if they posted the wrong number, somebody's liable for something.
Yeah, but they're only
How is
liable.
he supposed to know that they were the wrong number?
Incidental damages.
I go there every day and look.
Incidental damages, like somebody said, he went out and bought, because he thought he won, he went out and bought a nice new suit or a new car or something like that, for misrepresentation.
Well, that's wrong. But what bothers me is
he ain't gonna get the full amount. It ain't happening. As
Nick,
they say,
if I was playing blackjack,
and I don't believe in lottery winners anyway. So
Nick, if I was playing blackjack at a casino, or I was playing one of those slot machines, and the slot machine said you won, and then it gave me a ticket, and then I went up to the gate, and they said, no, You didn't really
That's
win. That's
happened. What you're describing has happened.
Reminisce ab discuss injuria, wrong without a remedy, my friend. But
Well,
you know,
just to let folks know really quickly, he is seeking 340 million in compensatory damage, any other relief that the courts deem appropriate, plus other damages, costs, and attorney fees. And he is asking for
he'll
a
lucky to get his
jury
attorney's
trial and everything. And just because they will publish these
I'm
things,
on
if
it.
anybody
Yeah.
wants to know his
Yeah.
attorney,
Wait,
his
I'm an
attorney is
authority.
named Rick Evans. So Rick Evans is his
Hold on,
attorney,
hold on.
and Rick Evans has said that the lawsuit raises critical questions about the integrity and accountability of lottery operations and the safeguards or lack thereof against the type of errors that
I did my own.
and the
I
PC
did
lottery
my own.
admits
I
occurred
did
in
my
this case.
own crazy laws. I sued a quiz show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, because
you did.
they asked me a question, and
Yeah.
the four answer choices, none of them were the correct answer. I'm like, that is
You're screwed.
screwed up. But I can tell you that they could have made it go away by giving me like $100 grand. But that would have created a precedent so that everybody who lost on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire would be suing them. So the lottery doesn't want to create a precedent by giving this guy any money, because then they will be, so they might spend $2 million fighting this lawsuit if they have to. They probably won't have to spend $2 million. You know, they'll probably have to spend like 80 grand on some lawyers, but they don't want to pay out anything in something like this, because that will encourage other legal action from other lunatics.
So what he'll find Rick, he will find his legal matter grinded into dust by the defense attorneys. And the real reason he's doing it, he's got some plaintiff's attorney that says, "Oh, we're going to win. We had that in chess the other day." Newman says, "I'm going to sue for $100 million for defamation." You know what he got? He got this. You know, I mean,
speaking of defamation, speaking of defamation and speaking of all that, we only got a few more minutes to go, and I kind of alluded to it earlier. Apparently, there are no wins on the horizon for Nikki Haley, and those close to the former United Nations ambassador are saying that she is definitely not going to step out of the race, even if there is a blowout loss in her home state of South Carolina, and all in that way on this coming Saturday. And they can't even think of a state where she is likely to beat Trump in the coming weeks. But I think that I've heard interviews where she has said that she is going to stick it out to the end. And maybe it's even to Sasha's point that she is thinking that some of these legal cases against Trump might be what then gets them to have to reconsider and bring her in as the candidate. I've heard the same things about Biden and the possibility of a Gavin Newsom presidency and all along those lines. Because even on one of our shows, Remixing Politics and Culture with Pam, they were talking, because they had a couple of local candidates on that show and everything, and they were talking about what one of the ladies that's running for DA considers a red herring. That's what she considers the whole age conversation. Santana DeBerry, she feels that it's a red herring, this concept of the age conversation. But one, I guess the question I have for everybody is, should she lose in her home state? Should she bow out of the race? Will she bow out of the race, or is she going to stay in the race all the way to the end? And is the whole conversation around age a red herring?
So, all right. So if she's polling 30% in South Carolina compared to Trump polling 65%, I think you should pay attention and see if Trump so far has not. He's underperformed the polls. So I think he's only going to poll, I don't know, 62%, just a little bit below what polls say he will, and she'll do a little bit better. And that's important because she can't win unless something bad happens to Trump legally or whatever. But it says that the polls are showing Trump being stronger than he actually is, which is pertinent when you're looking at the Trump-Biden deal.
I think that I can understand why she's doing what she's doing, and I respect it. She's keeping the doors open. I had a similar thing. I jumped into a race at one point because I had fairly good reason to think that one of the other people running might land with some legal issues that might cause him to have to resign. And so I think it's good to keep the doors open. It really is early days. A lot of things happen later.
And
one of the
Trump
old
will
farts
never,
could pass
even,
away or get
even,
sick and be in the hospital. You never know.
even if Trump is, and it's super unlikely, is legally, taken off the ballot or somehow loses the nomination, Trump will never stop running for president because Trump makes more than $10 million a month in contributions. And he uses that money however he wants, mostly paying for lawyers, but he'll just keep going. He'll probably keep running even after the election is over. He'll announce for 2028 and just keep going.
One of the things I do want to bring up too is that some of the things we do spend our money on, and here we are, we house a lot of the migrants, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but we also have our own homeless, including the veterans, and we can't house them. And I have issues with that. I have issues that we're not taking care of our own before we take care of others. And we need to step up to the plate and start taking care of our own people. And this has been brought up to me by the youth of our country, the young people. And I wish that they would stand up and rise with pitchforks and start pitchforking some of these people out of office, because they're right. We have left our youth with no country worth living in. Many of them are looking for other countries to live in right now. I literally had conversations with the youth today, and many of them don't even think the country is worth working in anymore. And that's sad. That breaks
And the
my
unfortunate thing for them is no matter where they go, democracy is participative. And if you don't like your country, it's your job to get in there and fix it. So if they go somewhere else, they're going to have to take that same action, although they may have a more
Hey, Debbie, along those same lines,
we
and we've
might
only got a
learn
few
that
more
other
minutes.
countries are working more with the youth than this country. Like I can go to another country, the medical care is 100 times better than it is here and 1,000 times more affordable. So, I mean, it just depends on what you're looking for. And that's what I told them. If America is not serving you, the world is full of wonderful, beautiful places that might serve what you're looking for now. You're not tied to America anymore. And I don't blame them for wanting to leave. If it's not serving what your needs are, then go where it is, because the world is open to that. Most of it. Some of it is.
Kim, along those same lines, I know we only got another minute or two, and I did see your hands, Rick, and everything. But one of the things that I saw, and it was actually with our guest on World Edition yesterday, who was a sleep expert, is that she brought up the fact that even though she is an expat and moved from, I believe it was New Hampshire to England and everything, that she is still having to pay taxes there in the UK. And she was actually saying that is a perfect example of taxation without representation, because she doesn't have a representative there as a UK citizen and in that space. So I found that interesting when she brought that up as
my kid is an expat, and you get a great deal. The first $110,000 that she makes in England is exempt from U.S. taxes, so it's not that bad for an expat.
But the lady said yesterday is that she still has to file taxes, so that's where she
have to file taxes, but you don't have to pay a lot in taxes.
And so, if she doesn't, there's an agreement between the U.S. and the U.K. I lived in the U.K. for 20 years, and I didn't pay taxes here, and I'm still getting a pension from the U.K., having paid into it there. But if she wants to be represented, then she needs to become a citizen. That's how it works. So maybe it's taxation without representation, and that's what we do with migrants or immigrants as well. But if you want to participate, you have to join the club.
That's right. I agree with that. And we are at the top of the hour. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Debbie, for joining us. Rick, thank you. Sasha, Mark, thank you for running the show and having some great dialogue. And we'll see you Thursday, everyone. Have a great week.
All right, easy.